Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories. Hello and welcome back. Today we have Greg with us, and he has been serving on the mission field for 35 years. So, Greg.
Started when I was 12.
Started when he was 12. He got started really young. Also, just a little note, he goes to some sensitive places around the world, so he's rocking the shades today just to protect his identity a little bit. So, Greg.
Yes. Am I cool or what?
You're awesome. Or what?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
So, yeah. And I apologize for the inconvenience of the shades, but we'll just go with that, right?
No inconvenience.
You're cool.
You just look so cool.
Yeah, thanks.
So, to start out, will you tell us what you're currently doing on the mission field?
Okay. So currently, I'm traveling to some countries in Southeast Asia, and that's the reason for the shades. Some of them are closed countries, and then also there's some Muslim friends that I have in various countries, and so the shades are for protecting them. So I go to a lot of different countries, and most of the work that I do is with unreached people groups. Unreached people groups are people that have never, most of them, the majority, at least 98% of them, have never had an opportunity to hear the good news. They've never heard about Jesus. They don't have a Bible, most of them. There's no church in their midst. And so I go and I share with these new people. And that's part of our Frontiers initiative that we have here at Globe.
And you didn't share this, Greg, but you're also part of the leadership team of Globe and director of disciple making.
That is right. Yeah, and so I've done that for 10 years, I think. I think a lot of the things started about 10 years ago, and I'll share with you all a little bit later how I made a switch between one country to Southeast Asia. And so,
yeah, so that brings us to, how did you even get into missions? I mean,
Okay.
you were 12,
Yeah.
so you're
I was 12 years old. Actually, just a few years later, and I went to Bible college, and there was a trip offered. I had heard about the Great Commission, and to go into all the world and to make disciples of every nation, and I wanted to do that. So I heard about a trip, and it was offered to Mexico, and I went down. I took a trip to Mexico, and what happened is we were heading to a small town. It was a little pueblo, and and Christy, you speak Spanish. We might rattle off some Spanish here and there.
Please do.
Yeah, and so actually Lindsay does too. So yeah,
I know how to say, "May I go to the bathroom?"
May I?
That's
Yes.
about it.
And that's very important too, especially if you really
Yes.
have to go. So, yeah. So, anyways, we're heading to this town, and on the way to this town where the missionary had a church, we went through another small town, and I asked the missionary, I said, is there any church here, or have they ever heard the gospel? And he said, no, as nobody has shared the good news here. And I looked around, and I looked at all the people, and I looked at, it was the plaza of the town. And right in the middle, there's ladies just doing their work, children smiling and laughing, other people that looked anxious, just everyday stuff. And right then, I thought to myself, if nobody shares the good news with them, it's very possible that they could die and go to hell. And at that moment, I remembered Isaiah, and it said, who will go? And I said, I will go. And I said, if not now, when? If not me, who? Yeah. And I made a decision right then, and that was like 1985 when I first, 1987, right around that time. So.
And that was when you were actually in Bible school?
I was in Bible school, came back and tried to learn some Spanish and started working on missions courses, and so it was really definite that I wanted to go.
And was that your first inkling towards missions, or had you felt like maybe a little bit like, I think I might want to do this before that, or were you just
that's
going
a
to Bible
good
school
question.
for?
So I was in high school, and I was in my bathroom, and the bathrooms are good places for God to speak to you because nobody else is there and you're quiet, And I really felt God speaking to me to go into the ministry. That's that. So I thought, well, all I knew about ministry was a pastor. So I said, okay, I'm gonna take off. Right then I knew I was going to start studying to go into the ministry, and it's when I decided to go to Bible school. Yeah, and then God started working on me, and actually I found out I was very evangelistic. I was pretty bold about sharing my faith, and God worked on me, and then just kind of a quick process from pastor to evangelist to missionary.
So how old were you really at that time?
Yeah, 16, God spoke to me about the ministry.
Wow.
18, 19. I entered into, I was 19 when I went to, 18 years old, I went to Bible school. And so probably 21 when I first took my first trip down to Mexico.
Were the rest of your family Christians or?
My mother had taken me to a church when I was younger. She stopped going because she said there was hypocrites in the church, which she was right. And left me in the church. I went by myself because I liked the Bible studies. The Bible, I just liked reading the stories. It was pretty cool. And so somebody took me until I was old enough to drive. They took me to a church. Later on, my mother, of course, returned to the church and started. She was always a Christian. Just because you don't go to church doesn't mean that you're not. But yeah, she started going back to a church. And my dad was 80 years old. I was on my way to Southeast Asia, and I've been sharing with them for years and years about just the need to follow Jesus. A man of integrity, but he never, because that kind of held him back because he was actually doing a better job as a business person with integrity than some Christians do. But he was 80 years old, and it was 2 days before I was heading to Southeast Asia, and he said, "Greg, I want to be baptized."
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, "Okay, I'm leaving in 2 days. When do you?" He said, "Tomorrow." So they had a swimming pool in their backyard, and I thought, well, yeah, okay, I'll go and baptize him. I drive up to his house, my family and I. We drive up to his house. My mother was there, of course, and I looked, and there's cars parked all around. He had invited the whole extended family.
Wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so I shared the good news with the extended family, shared why he was being baptized, baptized him, and then I have an aunt who said, "Okay, me too."
Wow.
And then one of our cousins, too. Said,
amazing.
"I want to be baptized." And so 80 years old. Yep.
Wow, that is so
and
cool.
he's serving the Lord today. Mm-hmm.
That's really neat. And that had been after you were years on the mission field.
This was not too long ago.
Yeah, yeah. So you were 18 then when you went to Bible college?
Mm-hmm.
And so you went to what, 2, 3, 4 years of school?
4 years.
4
yeah,
years.
4
And
years.
was that here in
This
Pensacola?
Pensacola area.
Okay,
yeah.
Liberty Bible College then?
It was.
Okay,
It's on the
and-
same campus as this Globe.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So you're back on well-known turf then.
Very well known, yeah.
So you went on that trip way back then
Uh-huh.
when you're in Bible college, and then did you decide right after Bible college, hey, I'm going to Mexico?
Yeah. And I think if you ask me the question, what would I do different?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would I do different now? I'm going to surprise you with this answer, but I went to Mexico, and I felt like God spoke to me about going on the mission field. It's the only place that I ever went to was Mexico. And so I just assumed, and many new missionaries do this. I assume that when I go on the mission field, that this is where God wants me to go. And so I'll just go ahead and jump to 10 years ago. I took my first trip to Southeast Asia.
What made that trip come to be? How did that happen?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Perspectives. Have you? Yeah,
the course Perspectives
the
on World
course
Missions.
Perspectives. I took that course Perspectives. We were offering it at Globe, and I took that course and started hearing about unreached people group and people that had never had the opportunity to hear about the gospel. and I started studying that. And then I took a trip with the director of Globe, and he invited me to, it was Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, and then also to another country that I go to that's closed. I took a trip on it. And when I was on that trip, this is really like it's another call to missions for me. It's like a whole new beginning. I was in this country, and I taught some English in the schools. And this taxi driver drives up to pick us up after I was teaching English in this school, and he spoke perfect English. And I'm thinking, wow, this is great. And so he asked me, he said, what are you doing in the school? I said, oh, I'm telling stories. And he says, what kind of stories are you telling? Great English. He was, and it's the first time while I was in that country I actually spoke to somebody who spoke such good English. And he says, what kind of stories? I said, it's from the greatest book in the whole world. And I said, the story that we just shared was about David killing this giant, and with God's help, he killed this giant. He said, wow, that's a great story. I just heard a story. I watched a movie, and it sounds very similar. It's called The Prince of Egypt. Yeah.
I love that movie.
He said, I've seen it 3 times. I said, oh, great. That story comes from the same book as the other story I was sharing. And it's the greatest book in the whole world. And he said, what is the name of the book? And I said, it's called a Bible. And the guy stops and he says, if this is the greatest book in the whole world. And I said, yeah, it's the most popular, it's the biggest selling book in the whole world. Yeah. He said, why haven't I ever heard of it? And right then it just hit me, man, he's never heard. I said, do you know who Jesus is? And you don't know what a Bible is? Do you know about God the Creator? Nothing. And he spoke this great English. And he said, why hasn't anybody ever shared that with me? And so it was just a big turnaround. It took me from Mexico all the way to Southeast Asia.
So this was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
So we say today you've been in missions 35 years. You'd been 25 years in missions.
Mostly in Mexico.
Mostly in Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden this just transformed.
This transformed, and I started making trips over to Southeast Asia. We still do the work in Mexico. It's in fact, I'm going back here in just a few days. But Southeast Asia has really been there, and plus there's other places that we have in our Frontiers Initiative that we go to and we visit that mostly it's people that have less than 2% of the population have heard the gospel. They're called unreached people groups. And so I go and help start up new works in these places.
Yeah, I just have to say that it just really impacts me because I lived on the field just for a decade, but still, being in one country,
Mm-hmm.
you fall in love with the people, you get to know the culture, you love where you're at, and as a long-term missionary, then it's difficult to pick up and leave, and even more so to redirect your vision to a new place and a new people group and a new culture and just everything new, and that's essentially what you're saying that has happened in your life. And so, to me, that speaks a lot about your living relationship with the Lord and just your heart to see those who don't know Jesus come to know him. So that says to me a lot about who you are, and just that you're more concerned about the kingdom of God than your own comfort, for one. I'd like to hear, because I imagine that the whole focus for ministry was different too. In Mexico, you were doing church planting, is that right? So when you first went then, can you speak a little bit to what that was like? What did you do? You got on the ground. I mean, there are people listening who, maybe just feel a call to missions and they're not quite sure where should I go. And there's a lot of different ways. That's what I love about Globe is that we just help, our vision is to help those that have a call fulfill that call and to do it well. So that looks like a lot of different things. And for you, even in your own life, you went from one thing to something completely different. Can you explain a little bit about what you did in Mexico and what that looked like and
Sure.
some of that process?
With people that look at their purpose, there's some words that's called defining moments, And I mentioned that, the defining moment when I went to Mexico, this small town. Another defining moment when I went to Southeast Asia. But here's another defining moment, and sometime we'll get my family and let them share too. But we were in central Mexico. It's a very tough place to minister, as far as it's a dry area, and spiritually dry too. And had done evangelism. As an evangelist, I switched over to church planting because I found out that as an evangelist, not I may win somebody to the Lord, but they may not be followed up on. And so I learned about disciple making, and even did some churches in central Mexico. And one day, this person invited me to go down to South Mexico, to Chiapas, Mexico, and he asked me to be on his team. And we went to this very large church. It was one of the largest churches in Mexico, and it was in South Mexico. We went there, and I was on his sharing team, and there's another missionary with us. And the missionary went up after the service, and he goes to this lady who has she has an orphanage. And he had taken a small child from that orphanage. They'd given him a small child from the orphanage. And so she says, how is your child? And he said, oh, she's great. And she says to him, we found a little girl on the street. And right at that moment, everybody looks over at me, and they knew that my wife and I had wanted children for been 8 years, and we wanted children. And they look at me, and so I look back at her, and I say, what is the child's name? They said, her name, we don't know. We found her on the street, but we put Anna as her name. I said, oh, my wife's name is Anna, and I'll take that child.
That's amazing.
They said, what, wait a minute. They said, you haven't even talked to your wife yet. I said, it doesn't matter. We've been talking about this for a long time. They said, you haven't seen the baby. I said, I'll take the child. So I called up my wife. In the meantime, I went to see the little baby. She was 2 or 3 months old. We don't know because she was abandoned on the streets. And I saw she had 5 fingers on each hand. That was good enough for me. She looked good to me, a little malnutritioned. I called up my wife. I said, God has provided us a child. She said, wait, what are you talking about? I said, come on down, come get her. She said, let me pray about it. I said, okay. So while she's praying about it, I'm buying tickets for her. She gets off. It's 2 days later. It took us 2 days to get the plane ticket. She, of course, said yes. I'm coming down. She gets off the plane in Chiapas, Mexico, and the baby is handed to us. She has a stuffed animal and I think a pacifier, and that's all. And we go into this hotel, and we got where we're staying with a child. Brand new 2 or 3 month old child. We're instant parents, and it was a defining moment, of course, in our family. But God used that to take us from a place that was tough to minister in, which was central Mexico, to southern Mexico, which was wide open for the gospel. And so we started church planting in this place, and it was just amazing. We just stepped into what God was doing. We stepped into a harvest field. And so God used those circumstances to take us to Mexico. And so we started doing some churches and worked with another church, and started working with the Indian groups. I'll share a story about that a little bit later. Started working with the Indian groups, but we just started multiplying churches, training leaders. And so we have a network of many churches. It's called Unanimous Ministries in Mexico. And God used those circumstances.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I could feel my face. It hurt. I was smiling so so
I
hard.
just can't imagine just like being handed a baby and then like, what do we
so
do?
Obviously, you completed the adoption.
Well,
and
that's another story. So 10 years adoption process because she had no paperwork.
Yeah.
So we had to backtrack. I became a Mexican citizen, and I went just
and
like
your wife is a Mexican citizen.
My wife is Mexican. That's right. My wife had come here and got her citizenship, and you know how you have to take a test and do that kind of thing. I had to do that in Mexico. Yeah, so I have dual citizenship. When I go to Mexico, I go with the Mexican passport, which is real nice. And but God used all of those circumstances. 10-year process. It kept us in Chiapas, and we dedicated a lot of time to working in the ministry and church planting, and of course with our new family too, because we had a lot of long processes of paperwork. And we do have legal adoption, and so we call her Anna and Christina, my daughter, and she's of course got her U.S. citizenship now too. So.
And a lovely young lady. I always am amazed being around families who've gone through adoption and seeing, because until I heard that your daughter was adopted, I thought she was your biological child. And it just is amazing how God does that. And so I never heard this story either about that whole process in that season of life. And it's almost like, so yeah, amazing what God he took you to one place, and then little did you know your life was about to change completely, and you went from almost just this place, this desert place, to this place of new life, completely new life in every way. And that's incredible. You had no clue you were walking into that new season.
And this, I think that we have our plans. We say, this is what I'm going to do. At the beginning of the year, we say, God, what is your will for me? We do that a lot at the beginning of the year. And so I switched it around a few years ago, and I said, God, what are you doing, and how can I be a part of it? Instead of saying, God, what is your will for my life this year? I'm saying, God, what is it that you're doing, and how can I be a part of it? Because we saw that when we stepped into a ripe harvest field in Mexico. And we see, and that's the same thing as far as Southeast Asia or whatever. God desires to see the whole world who will come to know him and have a relationship and have the opportunity to worship him.
So I just want to ask this question, because I don't think you told us this, but you went to the field as a single man and then met your wife on the field.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you met your wife, and then God gave you a family on the field.
Yes.
So for all those single young people out there, or older single people out there is hope.
That
Get on the
is
mission
right.
field, and
Go.
you'll find a wife, and you'll get a job.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Or go to Bible college.
Walk in the Lord's will.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
So how did you meet your wife?
Okay. So everyone would assume that I met her in Mexico, but actually a church called me up and asked me to help them out. And I was very evangelistic and to help them with evangelism in the church. And so this was back in the United States, and I got in. It was at my home church, and the very first week that I get into my home church, the pastor says, Greg, you're speaking. I said, okay, good. So he introduces me to everybody, and then he looks out in the crowd, and my wife had came to visit, she wasn't my wife at that time, this beautiful Mexican girl came to visit her sister, and she said, and look, there's somebody else from Mexico. And so he tries to speak the Spanish that he knows, and tries to introduce us, but he says buenas noches, como estas. Buenas noches, como estas.
He butchered it.
Yeah, what does that mean? How do we? Yeah. So he was trying to say, how are you? Good evening. How are you? Yeah, but he butchered it up, and so he said, you have good buns like these.
Oh no.
Yeah. But anyways, we did meet, and I went to her after church, and she spoke Spanish, and I spoke Spanish. The little I knew at that time, and so we went from there.
That's awesome.
So I've heard you talk a little bit about this, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So your appearance kind of helps you.
It does.
In all of the places you've been.
Yes.
You can pass as Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
You can pass as some other countries
Most
you've been
of
in.
them. Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that a little bit about,
But he's not Mexican.
I'm not
just
Mexican.
To clarify.
Yeah. I'm not Mexican, so...
He actually has blue eyes.
Yeah, right. Wonder what's behind
you
these.
can't see them, but...
Yeah, uh-huh. So it's hard to... So my dad is Lebanese, which unfortunately I didn't get to learn Arabic because it would have helped me a lot. But I tell you what helps more, and this is for anybody who is considering going to countries and you don't know the language, but something that's helped more than my appearance is that I speak English. And English will get open doors everywhere, just like I talked about in Southeast Asia, this closed country that I went to. Anywhere that you go to, the English just helps so much. And so there's hope, if you speak English, and even if you don't know another language, then go and just use it as a door. And it's awesome.
Well, I guess let's go back to when you were in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you had something about the Indians that you wanted to share.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'll share this with you. And this is pretty interesting. So we went up and we went to a church, and there is this. I've got some great pictures of this Indian leader, and they wear their. You can tell where they're from by the clothes they wear. And he kind of took me in, and he says, I want you to help us out. So we started training his leaders, and they had pastors, they had deacons, they had preachers, they had different levels of leadership, but it had a lot of leadership in their church. And so our church planning was very simple. We just trained up their leaders to go back to some of the villages they were from, and they started new churches, and we were able to multiply churches. Worked out really well. And I would just go from one place to the other. And when I was going to these places, they would give me an offering. And it's usually like the equivalent of $1 or so at very poor places. But they had another offering. Every time I would go to the church, they would give me, right in front of the podium, and I would be speaking, there'd be a box in there, and that box kind of moved. And so I'm thinking, the first time I'm thinking, what is in that box? Well, I get it, and it's a chicken. Yeah, you kind of guessed, right?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
so
a hen in there. Yeah,
It's better than like a rat or something.
It's better than a rat. It was a chicken, and so they gave me chickens. I didn't know anything about chickens, so I went home and I built this cage and put them in the chicken coop there. Yeah, so they besides the chicken, they would also butcher a chicken, which was a really big deal. And we always had chickens. It's called caldo de pollo. Yeah, and so we had that, and it was a great meal. And so I would speak in all of these places. So before long, I just started collecting chickens. Yeah, so I had all of these. I still have chickens.
You just saved them.
Yeah,
you didn't butcher them. You saved them.
No, I saved them. I didn't know how. I still don't know how to butcher them. They could give you some good lessons on it. But I get them now. I even have chickens now, and so I bring eggs to the Globe offices here. Yeah, when I'm here in town. So I had all these chickens. I put them all up there, and I just started preaching about giving. And I said, well, yeah, look, you give your chickens, give your first fruits and all. And I thought, man, this is a really cool thing. And I have all these chickens. I go out and I feed the chickens every morning before I go out to the little village that I'm going to. And so I go out there, and there's the chickens, and there's a rooster. They gave us roosters. So in English, what does the rooster say?
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Very good. And this one's for Christy since she speaks Spanish. In Spanish, what's a
rooster say? Isn't it like riki riki?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Riki riki. I don't know how it ends.
Yeah, it's like kiki
riki. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. A little bit.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that rooster would be out there, and it was kiki-diki. It wasn't cock-a-doodle-doo, because these
totally
roosters,
different in English
they
and
spoke Spanish. Yeah, that's right. And then, and you have the little chicks. What do chicks say?
Cheep, cheep.
Cheep, cheep, cheep. Well, it's very close in Spanish. It's
pio,
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 pio.
pio.
Uh-huh. Good.
That's so funny
Yeah.
how the
Yeah.
animals have
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, so. But I had all of these, and so it was kiki-kiki, pew, pew, pew. And I don't know what the hen says. I don't know if hens.
I don't know.
They don't.
Just
Cluck, cluck.
Yeah.
Cluck, cluck. Okay. And so yeah. Can we have some animal sounds here?
Next, we'll break into song.
Yeah.
We can do the chicken dance.
Yeah. We're going to get into the chicken dance here in a minute. So I would go out and feed them, but one day I get out there, and there's no pew pew, and no key kitty key. There's not even a cockle-doodle-doo. There's nothing happening there, and I'm looking around, and all of the animals are dead. All of the chickens.
They're there in the cage, but
all,
they're dead.
Yeah. It's a varmint. Or, whatever. Some wild animal had came in and killed all the chickens and the hens and even the little babies. And I was devastated. Yeah, I'm thinking, you had.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
It was, yeah. So I went home and my head held low, and I'm just saying, God, what is going on? And it's like God is just sharing with me. He said, you tell everybody about giving and about just giving everything. This applies to missions. But out of all of those chickens that you got, did you ever give one of them away as a first fruits or as a...
Wow.
You had all these chickens, you just kept them all to yourself.
Wow. He was giving you the lesson. You were
He
giving
was
everybody
getting that.
else.
Yeah, I thought I was teaching the lesson. Didn't have any more chickens, so I go to the market, and I find a nice one. I got the rooster, and then I said, nope, the hens are better because they lay eggs. And I get a nice hen, and I go out, and I give it to this poor pastor. I said, here, this is my first fruits. This is me giving everything first to God. And that's when God spoke to me. And he may be speaking to you as you're listening to. And I know he's spoken to you all. But God wants us to give everything. And it might be our best part. And we may be where we may have to say, God, I'm willing to give up my comforts. I'm willing to give up my family. Willing to give up whatever it is to do what you want me to do. Yeah. And this was my life lesson.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's good.
That almost hurts,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
That's really good, though. Thank you, Greg, for sharing that.
Thank you for the opportunity to share it.
There's lots of questions yet to go,
Oh.
but I'm curious to know, like, maybe you've already answered it, if there's something that you wish you would have known before going out to the field that you learned.
Well, the first answer, that was one of them. The first answer is, you don't have to go to Mexico just because you visit Mexico. I love Mexico, and God used this time in Mexico, but you don't, just because you visit one country doesn't mean you have to go there. And to be open to that and to pray about it. Because 10 years later, I found out about unreached people groups, and they've never had an opportunity to hear the gospel. I'm not saying I didn't waste any time. God prepared me. But to really pray about it's great if God calls you to go. And I think that's a big step. And then the chicken lesson is to give everything and give God first, put him first. But just say, God, what are you doing, and how can I be a part of that? And I'm available.
That's good. So take us through your transition. You obviously didn't completely leave Mexico, but your transition from just Mexico to Southeast Asia. What are some differences that you noticed in your approach to missions? Just, the culture, all that kind of stuff. I want to hear it all.
Good. Well, first off, the places that we go to now, that I go to now, I'm used to a church with a steeple. We call these legacy churches. This is what most of our listeners are used to. And this is the kind of church that we started because it's all we knew. But a lot of these places, most of them in the closed countries, like China, for example, they have underground churches. Or in the Muslim countries where I go to, they will be persecuted and maybe even killed if they go to a public building. So we do house churches. And so that's one of the differences in it. But The other thing that I was going to share, I think the best way to share a little bit of the difference is I'm going to share. I'll go ahead and put in my crazy missionary story. Can I do that?
Yeah,
Go
you
for
certainly
it,
can.
yeah.
You can throw out multiple crazy missionary
Well,
stories.
okay,
You're
there-
not limited
yeah,
to one.
yeah.
So.
No, as many
Okay.
as you can.
So I think this crazy missionary story will show the difference and show how I got over into to going to the other side of the world. But I went with the director here, Doug Gaiman. We went to Sri Lanka where he's been. And we decided we're going to do a crusade in Sri Lanka. And this is another type of ministry which you can do in many places, and God may be calling people to crusade ministries. All kinds of ministries work. It depends on the place that you're at and the place that you go to. But we got to Sri Lanka, and if anybody has ever traveled, you guys have traveled overseas, both of you. If you travel overseas, there's something that happens besides jet lag to a lot of us. And it happened to me, and I was in Sri Lanka, and it was 3 days, and I said, man, I'm having trouble going to the bathroom.
I knew it was some bathroom problem.
With missionaries, it's either luggage or bathrooms. Yeah. So this one, luggage got there fine, but I got there
Baggage
overload.
or bowels.
I had too much baggage when I got there.
No.
Yeah. So I'm there, and one of my friends says, "Here, take this pill tonight, and then tomorrow you'll be fine."
Famous last words.
Yeah. And I said, "Give me 2 of them."
Oh, no.
Double the trouble.
I took them, and you know what it was. It was one. Laxative would be an easy name for it. And I took that at night, and I said, "This is going to be great. I'll be fine tomorrow." Well, I wake up in the morning and nothing happens, and it's Crusade Day.
Oh, no.
So we get to the place, and there's a tent set up, and this is like in the afternoon, and I forgot about the little pill, the little, 2 of them.
Pills.
Actually. Yeah,
Yes.
double trouble. Yeah, and we are setting up, and then all of a sudden, you know this
That's
feeling,
the
right?
worst feeling.
Were you out like this empty field?
Yeah, this is the problem. It's an empty field, and so I say, "Where is where's the toilet?"
Uh-oh, yeah.
And everybody looks around. No, there's no toilet. I've had this problem with trees before, because one time never mind.
I don't know. I think we might need to come back to
Yeah,
that.
right. That, and we'll save that one for another day. But we can get on. So I'm looking for it, and they said no, but there's a village right up the hill here, and you can go to it. So I'm squirming, and this guy, waddling. The guy takes me up, and we go to this house, and there's a nice house there. And he says, "Hey, my friend needs to go to the restroom." So they take me to the back, and I'm looking, and there's not a toilet there, but there's this little hole in this Sri Lankan restroom, and there's spray hose. Yeah. So I go in, I figure it out. Ask for toilet paper. There's no toilet paper. Use the nozzle. Yeah. But anyways, they're called squatty potties. Yeah, in case for those that don't know, and that's pretty.
Was that your first time using a squatty potty? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I learned the hard way.
Quite an
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
It's a great first experience.
Yeah, it was
with
a great
squatty potty.
relief. Yeah. Uh-huh.
With double pills.
Double. Yeah. And so I come out, and I'm all smiling, and the family is sitting there looking at me, and they say, "Here, we have a cup of tea for you." And I go in and sit down with the family, and they give me a cup of tea, and we're able to smile at one another, and that's about it. And then finally a guy comes and helps translate a little bit. And so I invite the family, to go to this crusade with us, and they're real happy with me. I'm a family member now, Yeah. We got pretty intimate. Anyways, I go outside and I'm ready to go, and all of these young people are outside, and they want to practice their English. So I'm saying, okay, and so I'm practicing with them, and nobody had come down to the crusade, but all of a sudden I have this one family, and all of these young people that are with me, and they are following me all the way down to the crusade. And I'm feeling really good about this time. I mean, really good. I'm really, I'm really doing it. And this whole group, we have 20 people following. I felt like the Pied Piper, going down.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we go down and these people start filling up the crusade there, the seats. And then more people eventually come down. But what was really cool was this family that I went to their house. It turns out that they were the pharmacy. They were the doctors, witch doctors, or whatever you want to call them, and they were the most prominent family in the whole place. God had used my situation to get me in the doors of a great family. Everybody else saw this family come down, so they all start coming down too. Yeah.
So what you found is an inconvenience and just meeting an immediate need that you had. Actually, the Lord had for a greater purpose.
He used it to meet somebody else's
That's
need.
incredible.
Yes.
And draw the whole community because of
Right.
who they were.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And this family, by the way, ended up a couple days later. We had 3 nights. It took them a couple nights, but they gave their hearts to the Lord. And a lot of the young people, pretty cool. But this
That's
is
a crazy and cool.
yeah,
missionary story.
crazy. This is my crazy and cool missionary story, but I think the original question is some of the differences. And I tried to explain that there too, the squatty potty and the tea and no toilet paper and lack of English, just a lot of neat things. But if you're adventurous, of course, which I am, and a little bit bold, and a little bit crazy. God will use it. Yeah, God will use it all.
Do any other kind of crazy stories come to mind from your time in Southeast Asia?
Oh gosh. Well, this one I alluded to it there, and so it is always these rough times when you have to go to the restroom, and there's no restrooms and very little toilet paper. But I went out in the field. Why am I sharing this? Anyways.
I mean, you are disguised.
Yeah,
so.
I'm disguised, so you won't know. Yeah. Yeah. So I go by this tree, and it's the squatty potty by the tree, and I'm there, and this it's just crazy to me, but this cow comes up, water buffalo. He comes up and he starts nudging me. Everybody else in the car, and they look, and they said, "We just saw you running from one tree to the other."
But you were running from the water buffalo.
Yeah, it comes up and it's nudging me. Yeah. I wasn't finished.
He was trying to just be your support.
Yeah, he's being my.
Your
That's
support
right.
animal
Yeah.
while you're.
And everybody's in the car just laughing at me. They see me running.
Is there a photo or a video of this situation?
Don't we wish? Yes.
Put on with it, right?
Yeah. I don't know what brought that up. Anyways, so crazy missionary stories. We get a lot of those, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm a little bit curious. I know that I'm not going to say the name of the country just in case. You can mention it if it's okay. But there was like a big crisis.
Yes.
Where you went and several times. I want to know about that. Like.
Good. Yeah. This is so. Yeah. It's fine for me to say this place. So there is a big group of Muslims from Myanmar. And part of the problem is that they're Muslim, and there's political problems and ethnic problems. They're called Rohingyas. And several years ago, our task force, which Christy is on also, we identified this group as possibly being open to receiving the gospel. They're called Rohingyas. Look it up and look up the Rohingyas. And so we did not know anything about these people, and I actually did. I did with perspective. You do a final project, and I did my final project on that. And we said we want to get in to see these Rohingyas. Well, they had been genocided, exiled from Myanmar, Burma, and many of them went to Thailand. They went to Indonesia, Malaysia, and a lot of them went to Bangladesh. And there's some big camps that they just started forming in Bangladesh. And so we said, we want to go in there, and we want to do something with underground so that it won't put them in jeopardy. And I'd never been to Bangladesh at all. And I started looking for ways. I found some churches that might take us in and just didn't feel peace about it. Finally, myself and one other brave young man from Thailand, we decided to make a trip into Bangladesh and go to these camps, which are near Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. I get off the airplane, first time ever in a country like this, in Dhaka. It's the most densely populated, crowded city in the world. Dhaka, Bangladesh. I get there, and we're staying in a hotel there, and I'm just getting, just hit with culture, crowded place. And we spend the night in Dhaka. The next day, we get on this little turboprop airplane. It's like you see in Indiana Jones, and we fly down to Cox's Bazar. And all the time before we went, our prayers were this. It said, God, lead us to the right place and prepare that place, and then prepare the hearts of people, lead us to the right people. Holy Spirit, do that, and let us arrive with people like that. We prayed that for months and months before going. Well, get off the plane in Cox's Bazar, and we get on this little tuk-tuk or tom-tom. There's a lot of names for it. And we get in this little motorcycle that's it's got a place where you sit. It's a three-wheeler, and get in there, and we're on our way. And we really didn't make giant plans. We kind of just said, this is going to be a Luke 10 ministry. We go, and whatever God does, we'll just go with the flow. And we did. So as we're heading to a place, we found a little hotel we'll go to, and as we're heading there, the vehicle stops, and this guy gets out, and he says, hey, how you doing? I can take you to the camps. In English.
Just out of the blue.
Out of the blue, yeah. And turns out that the tom-tom driver had said, hey, he called him up, said, here's some gringos here, I guess, Yeah. Anyways, he says, I'm a fixer, I could do. And we didn't know how we were going to get in the camp, so we said, okay. Yeah, and the guy gets us. The next day he sets it up and gets us backdoor paperwork to get into the into the camps, and we actually go in and start meeting with Rohingya people. And it was really cool. But that night, what he did, he says, I have some friends, and we meet together every night, and we just talk and get together. So me and this young man, we go to this shady hotel. And we go in, and there's several men inside, and they're all smoke. It's filled with smoke, and they're sitting there playing cards. And the guy who invited us in, he says, share a story. You shared some stories with me. Share a story. I said, okay, I'm going to share from the greatest book in the world. And this is in a Muslim context, and so it's called, I share a story from the Injil, which is the Gospels, and they were fascinated. And I said, can I share my testimony? They're fascinated. My other friend shares it. And it's all these guys, and it's a pretty rough situation at the place that we're in. They invite us to come back the next night, and we didn't think much about it. I saw a lot of them. Well, we left from this trip, and we had got to meet the Rohingyas and got contacts. I still have contacts from the first trip. Made a trip back on my second trip back to this place and go with the Rohingyas, and we started doing disciple making. We passed out water filters to get into some of the the little camp villages, which are all they're very primitive, very very dirty place. Very not. We even took some other potential missionaries to these places, and they said, "No, I'm not sticking around. It's rough. It's a rough place." And so if you're maybe one of you all want to go, and if God is speaking to somebody, I want somebody to. These are hard countries. Most of the missionaries go to places that have already heard the gospel, or the easiest places, and the big majority of missionaries go to these places. The places like this, it's below 10%. It's 3%, 2% of missionaries go into places like Bangladesh that's very tough, that have never had the opportunity to hear the gospel. And so this is part of what we need to be doing, is getting out to these places. And what happens is, if you're obedient, then God leads you to people like that person who met us after we got off the airplane. And the second trip I came in, I went back to this smoke-filled room, and there's all these guys that are all sitting there smoking, playing cards, and they say, "Yeah, come on in. Share another story. Share another story." And then there's this one guy, and he's the owner of the hotel. And in English, and he hadn't told me before, in English, he says, "Come down to my office. I want to speak to you." He was, the owner of the hotel, and he spoke good English. I didn't know he spoke such good English. Guy spoke very good English. Go down to his office, and he says, "Greg, don't tell anybody this, but I want to follow this Jesus that you've been telling us about. Tell me more." So then I start setting up meetings with them and share with them. And he says, hungry as can be. He says, "Yes, I want this." So he makes a decision to follow Jesus. Third trip back, guess what we do? We take them to another hotel, and we baptize them inside a bathtub in a hotel. He starts following Jesus, and he gets his group of people together. I was just in contact with them this morning. And they, just because this is we call these people of influence persons of peace. He was the owner of the hotel. On this trip, his hotel's already transforming. It's not quite as shady as it was. And I go in and say, "Wow." And he's, "Oh yeah, I'm fixing it up." And it's pretty cool. And you see the transformation in him. Great friend now, and he's a disciple, and we're teaching him to make more disciples.
That's amazing. In your time in Southeast Asia or Mexico, did you ever feel like you were in danger being there?
I'm trying to think if there's ever... Now, there's some of us are we're either very brave or very stupid. Yeah. And so I fall somewhere in this category there, because we also take trips to New York City. And we go into New York City, which is open. Globe is sponsoring this too, and we work with another mission organization who does work. It's called Global Gates, and the people are coming from Bangladesh to New York City, and we also take trips into there. But even in New York City, which would maybe the Queens area, people you would think these are more dangerous areas or whatever. Going there, I can't think of any time that I've really felt that any fear of Bangladesh, going into a brand new place. Maybe it's because I'm naive or whatever, but you feel the hand of God that's with you. You're doing it, and it doesn't give us an excuse for stupidity, and we don't do stupid things, and we don't go to. You could go to a place in New York, and you shouldn't be there, or Bangladesh. But no, I'm trying. That's great that I haven't had that as far as with missions, And
Is there anything that you would want to leave us with, or share maybe with someone who says, "I know the Lord is calling me to missions, but I don't know where to go from here"? Like anything that you might want to just share to that next generation of missionaries?
Yeah, I do, because I would love to take you to Mexico, and we have this great work in Mexico. We could take you there, But this thing that I said that I learned, and 10 years ago, it's like almost another mission calling. Maybe take a perspectives course and get your eyes open to, or Kairos. There's some courses if you're thinking about becoming a missionary. We at Globe help you with those things too, and we have a lot of courses and we have training and all. But be open to particularly these places that have never heard the gospel. I don't know. We can say it's life fair, and I don't think it is fair. You ask this taxi driver that had never heard the good news if it's fair that he had never heard about the greatest book in the whole world. And be open to that. We at Globe, we have people groups we suggest. We have a Frontiers Initiative, which we're part of, and Bangladesh is part of that. We can help you and help you find places like that. Or you can also go on Joshua Project. You can, which tells about unreached people groups. But be open to that. I say all of that, but you have to be like we talked about with the chickens, being willing to give everything and to God first. And it might mean that you give up comforts, and that you would go into camps like the Rohingya camps that are no running water, no electricity, tin roofs, no permanent structures, and very dirty place. Would you be willing to do that? But the other question is, God, what are you doing, and how can I be a part of that? Am I available? And then you may be just like I was, and you could say, here I am. And then you could say, if not me, who? And if not now, when?
Wow, I love that. It's so good. Well, thank you so much for being here with your cool shades.
Thank you.
And your cool stories. Thank you for sharing with us, Greg.
Thank you all. Appreciate you all. And appreciate the opportunity to share. And, of course, all of us are here at Globe to help anybody fall into that calling that God has for them. But it's not just a call that God has in your life, but it's what God is doing and how you can be a part of it.